The rain had been falling since before Lauren Vay's shift ended, turning the stone lanes of the port into slick mirrors. He left the Colonial Trade Office as always, coat collar pulled high, keeping to the narrow walkways that ran between the freight repair yards and the merchant strip. The air smelled of wet rope, rust, and machine oil, a scent that belonged to this city as much as the cranes and the harbor lights. 12 years in the same post, recording cargo manifests, correcting weights and times, had dulled the edges of his life into something steady, even dull. Stability had been what he sought when he came here after the collapse of his marriage and the freight company that had once employed him. But stability had also come with a certain emptiness. The strip was quieter than usual, most stalls shuttered early against the weather. Halfway down, a stuttering green and white neon sign caught his eye. Its hiss and flicker drew him from the steady rhythm of rain, pulling his attention toward a bench that, unlike the others, sold no tools or spare parts. A broad-shouldered merchant sat there in a rain-slick coat, water dripping from its creases. Beside him stood a woman, barefoot, tall, and still despite the cold curtain of rain. Her skin was the pale violet of dusk light, smooth and unblemished. White hair, straight and heavy from the rain, hung down nearly to her waist, strands clinging to her shoulders. A short silk wrap, darkened by the weather, hung low at her hips, and a thin halter clung to her chest, leaving much of her torso bare to the chill. She did not shiver. There was a contained readiness in the way she held herself, as if every muscle was prepared for movement. She did not belong here, not because she was alien, but because no stall in this part of the port was meant to display people. And yet, she stood in the open, presented like part of the stock. The merchant noticed Lauren's pause and leaned forward, his mouth twisting into a smile that carried both mockery and salesmanship. For a night, human, she's yours. Lauren kept his eyes on her face. Her gaze met his without flinching. Her eyes were sharp, gold-rimmed with green, and they did not plead. They weighed him, as a foreman might size up a worker for a shift. The sound of rain on the awning above seemed louder in that moment. "What's your name?" Lauren asked. The merchant chuckled. "Names cost extra." "I'm asking her." When she spoke, her voice was low and steady. "Not important." The words were clean, deliberate. No accent from any system he recognized nearby. "How much?" Lauren asked the merchant. The number was high for a single night. Still, he thought of the credits folded into his inner coat pocket, reserved for emergencies. He told himself this counted. "Fine," he said. "But first, one answer." The woman's gaze didn't shift. "What are your rules?" That gave him pause. "No shouting. No locked doors. No taking without asking." She looked at the merchant. "He pays, I go." Lauren handed over the credits. The merchant counted without hurry, then waved her forward. She stepped closer, bypassing his coat when he offered it, instead slipping her hand into the crook of his arm. Her skin was warm, her grip light. They walked through the rain in silence. The hem of her wrap grew heavier with each splash from the cobblestones. She matched his pace exactly, not looking over her shoulder, not scanning for escape. She had decided her path for the night. At his building, he keyed the door code. The hall smelled faintly of boiled tea and worn paint. She entered without hesitation, leaving faint wet prints on the floor. He closed the door behind them, the latch clicking into place. "There's a towel on the chair," he said, turning the lamp down to a softer glow. "Hot water works. Soap's unscented. You can wash first or eat first, your choice." She glanced at the towel, then at the kettle. "Food first. I don't like heat on an empty stomach. Tea, bread, fish, or rice?" "Rice. And salt." He set water to boil, measuring rice into a pot with the habit of someone long used to cooking alone. She drifted to the window, cracked it open a few centimeters, letting in the smell of the harbor. You asked for rules, she said, eyes still on the dark water. Now I ask about safety. I don't drink. I don't use. I don't trap people. No one else has a key to this place. No one else comes here. She studied his hands as he sliced fish. Paper records. I have them. Clinic checks, 2 months ago. All clear. She nodded once, then sat near the window, towel across her lap. He noticed faint healed marks on her wrists, old enough not to draw attention, but they're all the same. I won't ask your name again, he said as he plated the rice. If you want to tell me, you will. Good. They ate without hurry. She chewed slowly, thoroughly, never flinching at the scrape of the fork on the plate. When she reached for more fish, she met his eyes first. A silent agreement that they shared this table. What do you do at the port? She asked. Manifest control. Keep cargo lists honest. Before that? Freight clerk, inner routes. Then I came here for quieter days. Maybe too quiet. She told him she'd been a dock runner, until a new foreman audited every hybrid worker's ID chips, claiming they came from the wrong batch. Pending, she said, means no pay. It means you stand in the rain until someone wants you for something else. He felt his jaw tighten. I can check the registry tomorrow. See if the audit's even real. You don't have my name, she reminded him. Don't use guesses. Agreed. I can search by foreman, ID, and date. Do it. Her tone was flat, professional. Somehow, that made him more certain. What's your mission, Lauren Vey? To keep the register honest. Pay my rent. Keep my temper in a city that looks away too easily. Tonight, offer you safety without pretending it fixes your life. She looked out at the rain. Mine is to stay alive with my choices intact long enough to not need a bench. They finished the meal. She showered, then examined the printed clinic records he'd left for her. You keep good paper, she said, setting the bundle on the shelf instead of returning it. Before deciding what came next, she asked, why was I on that bench? He listened as she explained, rent due, food to buy, lawful work on hold, unwilling to sleep in shelters where hands reached in the dark. You were chosen, she told him, because you didn't look away from my face. What do you want from tonight? He asked. A door that locks from the inside. Hot water, food, no shouting, no fear. Touch I agree to, at my pace. If I change my mind, it stops. And you check that audit. I will, he promised. She stepped close, guiding his hand to her waist. I set the pace. I'll follow. They moved with deliberate care, no rush, no performance. When they lay still, her hand rested on his chest, counting heartbeats. Later, she sat against the wall, knees drawn up. You asked my mission. Here's another answer. I need my work reinstated. My name to mean more than a price. Can you help? I can't fix the system. But I can track forms, find gaps, file complaints that force answers. I can introduce you to someone who hates sloppy paperwork more than hybrids. Do that, she said. Only if my name appears because I choose it. It'll be your choice. She slid down beside him, pulling the blanket over her hips. If I leave before dawn, it's for air. Not because I won't return. The door will be open from the inside. The rain eased to a tap on the sill. For the first time in months, Lauren felt the weight in his body loosen into real fatigue. Lauren woke before the first shift bell, the gray light of the port filtering in through the still open window. The sound of water lapping against the harbor wall reached him first, followed by the slow, even rhythm of breathing from the other side of the bed. Lyra lay on her side, one arm tucked under the pillow, her white hair spilling over the blanket in an uneven fan. Her presence was steady, unguarded in a way that made him hesitate to move too quickly. He weighed the questions in his mind. Would she leave without warning, stay for breakfast, lock the door when he was gone? But she stirred before he could decide how to ask. "What time?" she murmured, her voice rough from sleep. "Not yet 6. First bell in 20 minutes. You work today?" "Half shift. I'll check the audit logs first thing, see if the foreman's suspension records match what you told me." "Good." She sat up slowly, the oversized shirt slipping from one shoulder. "If they don't match, I'll know where the lie is." He dressed, pulling on a worn jacket and boots with the scuffed edges of years in the rain. The kettle hissed as he set it on the stove. She joined him at the table without asking, bare feet hooked on the chair rung. They ate in silence until he asked, "How long were you on that bench?" 3 nights. Long enough for the merchant to think I belonged there. Short enough that the regular buyers didn't see me as stock yet. That was deliberate. Yes. Stay too long, you're inventory. Leave too soon, you're invisible. I waited for someone who wouldn't look past me. She met his gaze without blinking. You didn't. The word sat between them as he wrote the door code on a scrap of paper. If you want to come and go, use this. But avoid the merchant strip. She read it once, slid it under the tablecloth without comment. The rain had thinned to mist by the time he reached the trade office. He went straight to his terminal, pulling up the foreman's ID and filtering the logs by the date she'd given. His stomach tightened. 43 workers flagged pending status in under 48 hours, all hybrids. The reason code was the familiar bureaucratic dodge, verification of identity markers, suspected counterfeit. It was a stall tactic, designed to hold pay without making charges that could be fought. He printed the list, folded it into his jacket, and signed out early. The walk back was shorter than he remembered. The apartment smelled of cooked grain and spice he didn't own. Lyra stood at the counter, stirring a pot. "You're back before the bell," she said. "I found what you wanted. 43 names. Same 2 days. All hybrids." Her grip on the spoon tightened. Reason code. Identity verification. Counterfeit suspicion. Policy, not personal, she murmured. Predictable. Which means we can counter it, he said. Her eyes held his for a moment. And you'll keep pulling at it? You've seen it now, you can't unsee it. I've already seen enough. Something eased in her shoulders, subtle but real. She served the food without further talk. The paper scrap with the door code was gone from the table. Over the meal, he asked, "What will you do with the list?" "Memorize it. Then decide who can hold a copy without selling it." "Selling it?" Her gaze sharpened. "Information is currency. A worker with proof of discrimination could trade it for a week's pay. But that wouldn't fix anything. It would disappear into someone's ledger." He told her about the foreman, Harry V., 2 decades on the docks, loyal to his own control above all else. She suggested making his numbers dirty enough to force him to act, but only through someone with no reason to protect him. "I might know someone," Lauren said. "Cale Dorn. Inspector. Comes through every few months. Hates incomplete records, has the authority to suspend a foreman's hiring access. He doesn't care about politics, only the data. If my name isn't in the file you give him, I don't exist," she said. "Exactly." They spent the afternoon with a notebook, Lyra sorting the names into those who would speak up if reinstated and those who would stay quiet. By evening, they had a plan. Cale Dorn was due in 3 days. She'd stay off the streets until then, and the list would remain locked in a false bottom drawer in Lauren's desk. She tested the mechanism herself, approving the hiding place. That night, they stood by the window, the harbor cranes swinging slowly in the mist. 3 days, she said. 3 days, he agreed. The first morning of waiting began with the sound of her moving quietly in the kitchen. She'd found the top-shelf tea, the one he usually kept for guests, and set it in front of him without asking. "You don't serve this to just anyone," she said. "I don't have just anyone here," he replied. The word seemed to satisfy her. After breakfast, he left for work, cautioning her to avoid the market strip. She only said, "I'll be here when you get back." She was. The apartment smelled of vegetables sautéed in something earthy and sharp. "Neighbors stopped by," she said as she plated food. His posture stiffened. "What did they want?" "One asked if you were renting the place. I told him no. Another brought fruit, just to see who was here. I said I'm a friend, and you don't rent rooms. Word will spread. That's not all bad. If they think I'm here by choice, they're less likely to try anything." The day passed in the rhythm of shared space, his cargo records at the table, her reading his old paper logs, occasionally asking about obscure codes. That evening, she stood at the window again. "2 more days," she said. "2 more," he confirmed. The next morning brought heavier fog, the harbor reduced to shifting shadows. Lauren woke to see her crouched at the door, sliding a folded paper under the gap. "Checking if anyone's been by," she explained. "The paper moves if the door opens. You've done this before." "I've lived where locks weren't enough," she said simply. They ate quickly. Before he left, he asked, "You trust me enough to stay again?" "I stay because I choose. Trust is earned over time." The bluntness didn't sting. It made sense. At work, he found himself distracted, counting the hours until he could check the drawer. She'd spent her day sorting the names again, this time into those likely to testify if given the chance. "You're thinking like an inspector," he said. "I'm thinking like someone who's had to prove the same truth to deaf ears too many times." That night, a knock at the door brought Marin, a neighbor from 2 doors down, with a tin of stew. Her eyes flicked to Lyra but she didn't press. When she left, Lauren locked the door. "Word's spreading faster than I thought," he said. "That's not all bad," Lyra replied. "Harder to make me disappear quietly." They ate in silence. She didn't look away from the harbor lights when she said, "Tomorrow is the last day before we move. You ready?" "I'm ready for whatever comes after. I don't want that bench again." "You won't have it," he said. She didn't answer, but her gaze toward him had lost some of its distance. The morning light was flat and cold, as if the color had drained from the entire port. Lauren woke early, already carrying the weight of tomorrow's meeting with Cale Dorn at the front of his mind. Lyra was at the table, her hair tied back, bare feet hooked on the rung of the chair. She was writing in her notebook, her white hair catching the dull light like frost. "You didn't sleep much," he said. "I didn't need to," she replied, eyes still on the page. "I've been running scenarios. What happens if Dorn takes the list but says nothing? What if Hera V hears about the meeting before it happens? You think someone might tell him? I think people talk when they think it will buy them favor. One wrong word, and V will move to protect himself before we corner him. Then we keep the circle small," Lauren said. "Just you, me, and Dorn." Her gaze flicked toward the locked desk drawer. "And that list stays exactly where it is until we walk it out the door." They ate a quiet breakfast. When Lauren left for the trade office, every look from his co-workers felt heavier, as if someone might be measuring what he knew. He moved quickly through his duties and left early, using a file check as an excuse. When he opened the apartment door, he could tell something had shifted. Lyra stood near the window, arms folded. "2 men stopped outside the building," she said. "Didn't come in, but looked up at this window more than once. One of them works under V. I've seen him on the docks." "They can't know about the list," Lauren said, though his pulse had already picked up. "They might not," she admitted. "But it means word about me has reached the wrong ears. That makes tomorrow more important." He checked the drawer. The list was still there, wrapped tight. Locking it again, he said, "Tomorrow I'll meet Dorn inside the inspection office. You won't have to be there." "I should be there," she said without hesitation. "If something goes wrong, you'll need someone who can read the room differently than you." "Lyra. If this is about safety, I'm already past the point of being safe. This is about control. You don't get to run this alone if it affects both of us." He weighed her words. She was right. "Fine," he said at last. "You come. But you stay out of the exchange until I signal. If Dorn reacts badly, I want you clear of it." "That I can agree to." The rest of the day they refined the plan. What to say. What not to say. How to frame the evidence so Dorn's focus would be on the breach in the system, not on them. Lyra memorized the route to the inspection office from 2 different directions, in case they had to split. As night fell, she stood in the kitchen doorway, watching him lock the drawer one last time. "Tomorrow," she said quietly, "you hand over a piece of me to a man I've never met. That's the last leap I make without knowing where I'll land." "And tomorrow," Lauren replied, "I prove you chose the right person to hand it to." For the first time since she'd stepped into his apartment, her expression edged toward trust. She rested her hand briefly against his chest before disappearing into the bedroom. The fog was thicker than ever the next morning, muting sound and swallowing the outlines of the cranes. They drank tea in silence, each lost in their own focus. Lyra wore the same shirt, sleeves rolled, a borrowed jacket over it, something that wouldn't stand out in the inspection district. "When we walk in," Lauren said, "Dorn will have 2 clerks at the front. They'll log us and send me through. If they ask about you, I'll say you're a secondary witness. And if he doesn't like seeing me there, then I take the lead. You keep quiet until I tell you otherwise. The less you say, the less they can use later." "Clear," she said. They left without lingering. The streets were damp from an earlier drizzle, carrying the sharp scent of salt and machine oil. Lauren took the longer route, skirting the merchant strip entirely. Lyra walked beside him, her eyes steady, scanning corners and doorways without drawing attention. The inspection office was a squat, functional building near the inner docks, its faded crest marking it as Union property, neutral ground, where a foreman's power meant less. Inside, the air was dry, the lighting flat. A clerk at the front desk looked up. Lauren said. "Here to meet Inspector Dorn. Appointment under port audit follow-up." The clerk checked the screen, nodded. "Second door on the right." Cale Dorn was tall and lean, his hair shaved close, his union inspector's coat as plain as the bare desk he sat behind. His gaze swept over Lauren, then paused on Lyra. "Didn't expect a second," Dorn said. "She's a witness to the pattern," Lauren replied evenly. "If this goes where I think it will, her perspective matters." Dorn leaned back in his chair. "Fine. Let's see it." Lauren slid the folded papers across the desk. Dorn opened them, scanning line by line. His expression stayed still, but his pen began to tap against the desk in a slow, steady rhythm. 43 pending in 48 hours, Dorn said. All hybrids. Reason codes too vague to stick. Policy abuse. Systems being used to stall pay and cut the workforce without proper clearance, Lauren said. Where'd you pull this? Trade office logs. Search by foreman ID and audit date. For Hariv V. Dorn's gaze sharpened. That's a name I've heard before. He set the papers down. I can't reinstate all 43 on my own, but I can flag this as a labor compliance breach. That forces a temporary lift on all pending cases until review. How long before it takes effect? Lyra asked. Hours. Once I file, V's board will light up. He won't like it, but he can't block it without going over my head. And my head reports to the union. You'll keep our names out of it, she pressed. I don't care who found it, Dorn said. All that matters is clean data. The rest is noise. Lauren met Lyra's eyes. She gave a small nod. Dorn began typing, his fingers fast and precise. When they stepped back into the street, the fog was thinning. Lyra's jacket was unbuttoned now, her steps lighter. "You think he'll do it?" she asked. "He will. Dorn's one thing is that if you give him a dirty record, he'll clean it, no matter who it hits." By the time they reached the apartment, she'd stopped scanning doorways. Inside, she set her jacket on the hook and faced him. "It's done," she said. "It's done," he agreed. She stepped closer, her hand resting lightly on his chest. "Then I'm not leaving tonight." The weight in his shoulders eased for the first time in days. "Good." They stood there in the quiet, gulls calling outside through the open window. No more plans, no risks to calculate, at least for now. "This isn't just your place anymore," Lyra said. "It's ours." He didn't argue. The doors stayed shut. The harbor was waking slowly under a thin veil of sunlight that fought to break through the fog. For once, the city felt unhurried, its usual clang of cranes and cargo hooks softened by the distance. Lauren and Lyra lingered over tea at the small table, the open window letting in air that smelled faintly of salt and iron. The tension that had gripped them for days was still there, but it had shifted, less like a trap ready to spring, more like a low hum that reminded them not to relax too much. Lauren found himself studying her in the morning light. The pale violet of her skin seemed warmer now, and her long white hair caught streaks of brightness as the fog thinned outside. She was calm, watchful, but no longer braced as though expecting a sudden blow. "What now?" he asked, more to test her mood than out of strategy. "We wait to see if the list does what it should," she said. "If it does, 43 people walk back into work with pay restored. If it doesn't, we plan again." "Dorn will do it," Lauren said. "I believe that you believe that," Lyra replied, and there was no malice in her tone, just the acceptance of someone who had lived through too many disappointments to take victory at face value. They spent the morning in quiet routines. He went through backlogged cargo entries, the work somehow lighter now. She took a cloth to the window ledge, wiping away the thin grit carried in by the harbor wind. Every so often she would glance at the street below, but without the tension of those first days, more a habit than a warning. By midday, the sound of gulls was joined by the hum of port traffic. A knock at the door came, light but deliberate. Lauren set his cup down, exchanged a look with Lyra, and stepped to open it. Marin from down the hall stood there again, holding a folded scrap of paper. "Message came for you from the union office," she said, her eyes flicking over Lauren's shoulder toward Lyra. "Didn't read it." Lauren thanked her, closed the door, and opened the paper. The message was short: pending cases lifted. Review in progress. Reinstatements effective immediately. Beneath it, a note in Cale Dorn's precise, blocky handwriting: data clean. Keep your head down. He handed the note to Lyra. She read it twice before handing it back. "That's as close to a promise as you're going to get from a man like Dorn." "It's enough," Lauren said. She leaned against the table, arms crossed, thinking. V will be furious. He'll know someone pulled those files, even if he can't prove who. "Let him be furious," Lauren said. "He can't undo the reinstatements without a fight he won't win. Maybe. But he'll remember. Men like him always keep a list of who to watch." Lauren shrugged. "So do I." That earned him a faint smile, the first that wasn't tinged with guardedness. The rest of the day passed without interruption. They cooked together for the first time, Lyra standing beside him at the counter as they chopped vegetables and fish. The rhythm between them had shifted. They no longer moved around each other like two people keeping distance, but like two people learning the shape of shared space. Evening brought a gold light through the window, turning the wet cobblestones outside into a mirror of the sky. They ate by that light, the hum of the city a low backdrop. When the plates were cleared, Lyra stood at the open window. "I've been thinking," she said without turning. "About what?" "That bench. Those 3 nights. If I'd left after the first, I wouldn't be here. If I'd stayed past the third, I might still be there." She glanced over her shoulder. "The timing was the only thing I controlled." "And you still control what happens next," Lauren said. She looked back out at the harbor. "I'll stay for now. Until I decide my next move. Then we'll make this a place you can stay without looking over your shoulder." She didn't answer, but she stepped away from the window and sat across from him. Later, as the harbor lights came on, she reached across the table, laying her hand over his. Her skin was warm, her grip light, just as it had been the night they met. "You didn't look away," she said softly. "I don't plan to start now." The room was quiet except for the muffled sounds of the port settling into night. Outside, cranes swung lazily in the glow of sodium lamps, doing their endless work. Inside, 2 people sat at a small table, the distance between them now something they both chose to close. For the first time since she'd arrived, there was no immediate next step, no looming deadline, no plan to rehearse. Just the fragile reality of a small victory, and the awareness that tomorrow would bring its own weather, rain or sun, fog or clear, and they would meet it together, for as long as they chose. If you've been with us from the start of this story, you've seen how 2 strangers, Lauren Vey and Lyra, met in the rain and decided, in their own quiet, stubborn way, not to look away from each other. What began as one night under a shared roof turned into something more, an alliance built on clear rules, steady choices, and the willingness to take risks when the stakes were high. In the shadow of the port's cranes and the noise of the merchant strip, they found a way to challenge a system that preferred to keep its victims invisible. 43 workers got their livelihoods back because one man refused to ignore a pattern, and one woman insisted her name would only be used on her terms. Maybe that's the real point here: change doesn't always come from loud speeches or grand gestures. Sometimes it's in the slow work of sorting names, locking a desk drawer, and walking through fog toward a conversation that might change everything. It's in keeping a promise to stand beside someone, even when the outcome isn't certain. If you took something from their story, whether it's the grit of holding your own ground, or the reminder that alliances can start in the most unexpected places, then do me a favor. Share this with someone who needs it. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story we bring to life here. And give this video a like if you believe that even small victories matter. Because in a city full of noise, it's the people who refuse to look away that make all the difference.